Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Happy Monday, guys. March 18th. Happy St. Patty's Day yesterday. Hope you guys had an awesome weekend. I'm coming to you live with an awesome broadcast. I hope you gain a lot of insight into us. Where we're going to be talking about corticosteroids and your immune system, or corticosteroids and your immune system response. So this is going to get really good. It's going to get really interesting as we get into it a little bit, but hopefully you find a lot of benefit from doing this, and it'll help you to understand what you're going through specifically. So if you're watching right now and you are joining us on Facebook or on YouTube, even on the Rumble platform as well, make sure that you just say hello and also let me know where you're watching from. I would sincerely appreciate that as well. But let's talk about corticosteroids and your immune system response, okay? Corticosteroids and your immune system response. Now, I always go over this first, but you will understand why the inflammation talk is so important to be at. We're going to be doing our next one in person Tuesday, April 2nd at 6 o'clock p.m. If you are from the Chicagoland area, I have people reach out to me all the time from the Chicagoland area. Please make sure that you register for the in-person inflammation event Tuesday, April 2nd at 6 o'clock p.m. You can go to the top of our page if you're watching on Facebook, and you'll be able to register for it from our Eventbrite page. You can also, if you are watching on Instagram too, and if you go to my profile, you'll be able to see where to register for that. It'll say work with me in person. I would love to see you at that inflammation talk. The eyes get big and they get open and people start understanding things. One of the biggest things I'm going to tell you is this, is that most of medicine deals with inflammation. They're not dealing with the causes of inflammation, but they're dealing the medications that they're giving, like corticosteroids, are dealing with the effects of inflammation. So you have to understand what it is and where it's coming from and why it can cause weight gain, why it's linked to cancer, problems with infertility, including corticosteroids as well, thyroid issues, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, and even hormone issues, guys, because remember, hormones are messengers. And when you are sick, the messenger system gets really messed up. You don't need to balance your hormones as much as you need to help control inflammation, especially. Now, if you are watching from outside of the Chicagoland area, then go ahead and you can watch the webinar. This is available on a Facebook page. If you're watching on Instagram, you'll be able to say, work with me remotely. And you can watch the inflammation webinar and register for that. And you will see you can register for Tuesday morning, Saturday morning, or you can watch it on demand. Make sure that if you are watching on demand, you have at least an hour of your time. And at the end, there will be a link that you can schedule a discovery call with me. And those are for people who really want help. Okay. Now, I will tell you this is that as this fills up, I will be taking this down most probably within the next couple of weeks, at least for the time being. So when people say, I want to work with you remotely, I'll be like, we don't have any availability. Sorry. So here's your chance. And if you've been on the fence, you've been watching us forever, and you know you need to do it, now's the time to do it. Make sure you watch that webinar, that inflammation webinar. It's the same exact thing as the inflammation event that we do in person, except I'm in front of a computer with a microphone, things like that. So I would rather do it with a group of people to be able to connect with them most. But if you are outside of the Chicagoland area, but you're within the contiguous 48 states of the United States of America, make sure that you watch that, and that'll give you an opportunity to be able to work with me remotely as well. How many of you guys have been doing the You Don't Know Squat challenge? So I hope a lot of you have. And what's really interesting is I've done that almost every single day since March 1st. So this was March 1st all the way through March 31st. Is do your 10 to 15 minutes of mobility in. And I have a video pinned to the top. If you're on Instagram, also it's on Facebook, you'll see that on exactly what you should be doing every single day in order to gain better squat mobility. Here's the thing with squatting is that everybody needs it. Life doesn't say, oh, you're old or your knees are bad or whatever, you don't need to squat anymore. No, what happens is they put you in a nursing home when you can't squat anymore. And people say, well, I don't like to squat. And I'm like, well, then don't go to the bathroom, because going to the bathroom requires you to be able to squat. It's a necessary thing that you need in everyday life. So, and if you do that, guys, most of the miracles that take place aren't like doing things one time. It's doing them repeatedly over a course of months or sometimes even years. And you'll understand that you just need to continue doing this more and more to give your body time in order to be able to adapt. So if you are watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll actually will see this t-shirt right in the middle. That's our official t-shirt for the You Don't Know Squat Challenge. And it's a t-shirt that says, "You don't know squat." Okay. So I had a video of me doing it today, and you can see that even doing this very consistently, even my squat's getting a little bit better. It's getting a little bit better. So I'm getting older, but it's actually getting better. A lot of people have asked me, they're like, "Hey doc, I see some of the t-shirts you wear. Where can I get those?" And so I put up a picture on here of just some of the um, most popular ones. And you'll see if you go to bonfire.com, I think I put a link in the chat of where you can actually just copy that address and you can go visit it and you can go to our actual t-shirt store. And we just don't have two. We probably have 8 or 9. The most popular one is the Mandate Burpees t-shirt. And you can get this in men's sizes as a sweatshirt. And yes, you can also get it in women's sizes and in multiple colors. The cool thing about our t-shirt store is that you can get exactly the one that you want in multiple different colors. They'll print it on demand and then they'll mail it to your house within probably about 2 weeks. So you see the Mandate Burpees one. I have an awesome story with the Mandate Burpees t-shirt. And then the also You Don't Know Squat, but we have a lot of other ones too that and including Nobody Cares, Work Harder. Okay. And this has to do with people who just complain, all the time. But we have those t-shirts. You can visit our store. You can order a t-shirt. I would love your help. I would love your support doing that and also get a pretty awesome t-shirt in that process. So visit our store. And I know we actually gave a ton of gift certificates away to be able to get a t-shirt in the store. And I'm seeing those filter in as people get the t-shirt. So if I got you a gift certificate, make sure you utilize it and use it so that, and you order that from our t-shirt store. All right. So how many of you guys ever felt this? And if you have felt this, just go ahead and put a like or say, "Yep, that's me." But you're drowning and you don't feel right and you're drowning and you reaching your hand up saying, "Hey, please, someone help me." And then the doctor reaches down and says, "Congratulations, your labs are normal while you drowned." How many of you have ever gone to the doctor and you haven't felt right and they run labs and yet the doctor comes back and says, "Doc, I don't feel right." Like, "Yeah, but you should feel fine because your labs are normal." Let me help you understand the difference is because when we test, we're not testing for fires. When a doctor tests you, they are testing for fires, but you can have fires building and you cannot feel right. That's why we don't test for fires. We're testing for causes. There's a big difference between the two. So that's why, how many of you have ever not felt right and then your doctor's like, "Yeah, but your labs are normal. You should feel absolutely awesome." There's a difference between testing for fires. There's a difference between testing for causes. This is why so many times, guys, when I look at someone and I say, "Have you gotten your foods tested?" They're like, "Oh yeah, I've gotten them tested." You didn't get them. You didn't get the right response tested. "Have you gotten a stool test?" Most people are like, "What do you mean?" Or, "I did get a stool test," but they didn't test for all the different things that are going on. Same thing goes with thyroid. Same thing goes with your hormones. That's why a Dutch test is so much different than all the hormones that you're testing for. It's just so much different and it's so much deeper than what your doctor and people say, "Well, why doesn't my doctor test for these?" Well, the reason why is because they don't test for anything that there's not a medication solution. And if you're watching this, you probably don't want a medication solution, especially when I talk about corticosteroids in your immune system. And there's a big difference between the two. Now, I posted this on my page a couple of days ago. We had Illinois Thermography come into our office and do thermography on women who wanted it. Okay. Now you can go in and you can look at thermography, why I prefer thermography over mammography. And here's one of the biggest reasons why is because, and this is why I ask women this all the time. I'm like women who go and they get a mammogram every single year and it's clear, 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 clear. Now there's cancer. And I'm like, that a thermography would have told you that there's changes taking place way before a mammogram would have showed you anything. So the biggest thing with thermography is it will start to look at changes within the breast tissue long before it ever shows up as, as even some, it'll say there's things that are starting to change. And I would rather change it then than to change it when you already have cancer. So there's a big difference between that. So I posted this picture. I have a wonderful relationship with Cindy, who owns Illinois Thermography. She does a wonderful, absolutely phenomenal job as well. But within like an hour of me posting this, someone came in and I blacked out their name because I don't want you to go back and I don't want you to be sassy to this person. Okay. um, but one of the comments is like, well, isn't a DC a chiropractor? Why would they be involved in breasts? And here's the reason. Here's the reason why. Obviously, this is someone who looked at this. They didn't like it, nor do they probably know anything that we do. But here's the biggest thing. I hope this person is watching. I really doubt it, though. But I want you guys to think of this. Did you know that some of the first chiropractors in the Palmer Clinic, they were doing blood testing. They also had a huge physical therapy clinic as well. And this goes back, even 70, 80, 90 years, and they were doing blood work. Did you know that? And chances are this person had no idea that chiropractors were doing blood work way back into the day, which is why she kind of made kind of a sassy comment, or whatnot. So I doubt that she actually knew that. And the reason why is partially chiropractors' fault because they market themselves as neck pain, back pain doctors. And I'm like, really? Huh, that's interesting. But when people, and what she meant by this was, you're just a chiropractor. And when people say that all the time as some kind of negative comment, I'm like, yep, that's all that I am. And I'm doggone proud of it, because being a chiropractor and understanding the philosophy behind chiropractic helps me to look at things from a different perspective. That's why the whole philosophy of chiropractic says the body is designed to be well. The body is a self-healing, self-regulating organism that really doesn't need help. It just really needs no interference. So what are we really good at? Looking at what you're doing that's creating interference that can cause poor health. And then we're really good at removing what's interfering with it. So why is a DC involved in breasts? Well, because I involve myself in the entire person, body, mind, and spirit. If I can do something that can help a person, then I will do something in order to help a person. And so this person still hasn't responded. I don't expect them to either. So if you see this is a meme. You probably have seen this before, but Danny DeVito coming out of a couch. When someone who never comments on your post, only pops up to disagree. So this is usually what I think about when someone actually does that. Okay. Now, so many times people say you need to go to a specialist. And I'm like, okay, you know what really a specialist is? Because when we look at the body, we look at the body as a whole. We don't look at you as just some kind of meat suit that you just have skin, you just have glands, you just have organs, and all of those have to be looked at individually. All these things should be looked at together because every single one plays off of the function of the other one. We call it the Swiss watch principle. But what happens is if we have skin issues, we go to a dermatologist. If we have an immune system issue, we're going to an immunologist. We have a problem, with a respiratory system with our lungs, we go to a pulmonologist. Problem with our circulatory system, we might go to a cardiologist or someone else. Endocrine system, an endocrinologist. You realize for every single one of these gears of the Swiss watch, we have a specialist. We even have a neurologist. Okay. We have a specialist for all those different things. And guess what they look at? One organ system. And then they look at the organ system under a microscope and figure out what can I do in order to manipulate that. Yet they're not looking at health, they're looking at one organ system. So that's why I say, and this actually goes back to the developer of chiropractic, BJ Palmer. He said a specialist is someone who knows more and more about less and less until finally they're experts in nothing. This is why I get a chuckle out of people who they can't figure out what's going on. So they just throw up their arms and they're like, we're going to go to the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is going to figure this out. I'm like, that's fine. Mayo Clinic, they'll run a bunch of labs, but you know what their answer is still going to be? It's still going to be drugs and surgery, it's still going to be that. And so that's why you have to, guys, we have more experts and we have more specialists than we ever had. Yet we have more people who are sick and a lot of people who come to me saying, I went to the specialist and they haven't been able to figure it out. And maybe we need to stop going to the specialist. Maybe what we need to do is actually start getting our health back. That's one of the biggest things that I can tell you. Now, if you are on corticosteroids, okay, please don't send me a message being like, what do I need to do? I actually can't tell people to go off of medications. However, they'll start to figure it out pretty quickly. But here's one of the things I want to ask you. Do you have an illness or do you have an injury? So many times people think they have some kind of illness. And I know that they have fallen in love with their illness when they start calling it mine, like my fibromyalgia, my depression. I won't allow people to be able to call it mine because as soon as you start calling it mine, it starts to become a part of your identity. So I want to ask you a question. Do you have an illness or do you have an injury? And if you are watching, you'll see I have a picture of a skin knee up here. Now, I talk about this during the inflammation talk, and it's this. Imagine if you decided, hey, I'm going to start walking or I'm going to start running. The weather's starting to get warmer. So you go outside and you start running and you hit your foot on a buckle in the sidewalk and you fall down and you skin your knee. Okay. No, I want you to think of this. If you skinned your knee, is the skin going to get red? Yes. It's going to get swollen. Yes. Is it going to get hot? Is it going to get painful? Congratulations, you're inflamed. That's something that is needed and necessary in order to bring resolution to that tissue. Now, at that time, you'd say, I have an injury. But what would happen if every day you went out on the same run, hit the same buckle on the sidewalk, and you would fall down, hit the same spot on your knee, and you kept opening up that scab? And you did that every other day or so, and you've never given a chance for that to be able to heal. Remember, the inborn mechanism is for it to be able to heal. You don't need to take a nap. You don't need to eat some kale, and you don't need to go run a 5K in order for that to be able to heal you. That's what everybody thinks what health is. You actually don't need to. You need to stop injuring it, and if that happens, that will start to heal. And so, if you were doing this every single day, I want you to think about this. 3 months later, you still have a scab on your knee, and it's probably just crusted, black, oozing, chronically inflamed. It just looks absolutely horrible. And if you went to the doctor's going to look at that scab, and you can imagine if they're like, well, let's do a tissue biopsy, and they do $19,000 a test, and then they come back, and in all seriousness, they're saying, yep, you have a really nasty case of chronic knee scabitis, or we'll call it genu scabitis because that's Latin for the knee. And if you came to me and you had that scab on your knee and that's been going on for like 5 or 6 months, the first thing that I'm going to ask you is what you need to really do is figure out how to stop falling down on it. Maybe if we just learn how to stop falling down on our knee, then finally that's actually going to be able to heal. We need to stop injuring that. And I want you guys to know something is many of the things that you are dealing with, they're not an illness, they're an injury. And doctors want to call it an illness to remove all hope, or if they can't figure it out, then it's an illness versus an injury. And if you started to look at everything that was going on and started looking at it as an injury and not an illness, the first thing that does is it starts to give you some hope. Maybe I can do something. Maybe I can start to figure out how to stop injuring my body. I'm going to give you a wonderful example here in just a little bit. So if you are talking about corticosteroids, I want you to think of this, okay? Corticosteroids are basically a derivative of cortisol, also known as cortisone, and they discovered this many, many years ago, that if they gave a person high doses of cortisone, then there was a massive anti-inflammatory response. And if you look at the sex hormone pathway, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit, you're going to say, oh, yeah, now I know why it makes sense. And if you understand how the body works, you'll know why that makes so much sense. So I want you to think of this. If you had a bear chase you, and this is a grizzly bear. He looks very scary. If I had a grizzly bear chasing me, I would have a stress response. If I had a bear chasing me that was going to run after me, was getting ready to kill me, I'm going to run as fast as I can in order to get away from the bear. And I'm going to have a stress response. And my body is going to be circulating with stress hormone, things like cortisol and adrenaline and things like that. Now, I want you to think of this. If I have a massive stress hormone response, I'm also going to have a massive anti-inflammatory response. And the body is smart. It's not stupid. We have to stop looking at the body as stupid. We have to start looking at the body as wise and intelligent and knows exactly what it's doing. But think of this: if I am running away from a bear having a stress response and I sprain my ankle, now is not the time for it to get red, swollen, hot, and painful. And in fact, you'll notice that nothing happens until that stress response starts to go away. Then you look down and it starts to get really red, it starts to get really swollen, it starts to get really inflamed. Because at that time, if a bear is chasing me, it's not advantageous for my ankle to start swelling up and for it to be very painful, because I still have to be able to run away from the bear. When they realize that, they're like, man, if we give people high dose steroids and we mimic cortisone, they'll have a massive anti-inflammatory response. So maybe we just give it to anybody who's inflamed. And now we are dealing with a lot of consequences with it, because if you look at this sex hormone pathway, guys, if you can remember some of this, you'll realize that all hormones, your sex hormones that are going to include progesterone, cortisol, cortisone, testosterone, estradiol, all are derived from cholesterol. Okay. They're all derived from cholesterol. But if you look at cortisol and you look at cortisone, which it gets the anti-inflammatory effect that it gets converted into, cortisol is released during a stress response. And what's the stress response known as? Fight or flight. Okay. That's a stress response. And that only happens when your body is under any kind of stressor, and that can be either real or that can be perceived. This is why when they say mental stress can absolutely wreck a person, they're absolutely right, because you are going into a stress response all of the time. And that's why you'll see, if you look at some of the responses of being in chronic fight or flight, why there's issues with low stomach acid, why there's issues with poor digestive function, why there's issues with a change in hormones, including ladies, progesterone, things like that. That's not the body messing up. That's the body trying to adapt to stress and things like that. But they realized, hey, if we give people corticosteroids, there's a really massive anti-inflammatory response. And so basically, if you give a person a steroid medication, you are mimicking a stress response during that time. So let's go to the Mayo Clinic, guys, and look at prednisone and other corticosteroids. So I don't know what you might be taking or if you know someone who is, but prednisone is very, very prevalent. And here's what the Mayo Clinic actually says. Corticosteroid medications include cortisone, hydrocortisone, and prednisone. They are useful in treating rashes, inflammatory bowel disease, asthma, and other conditions. But corticosteroids also carry a risk of side effects. How do corticosteroids work? When prescribed in certain doses, corticosteroids help reduce inflammation. Do they do that? Absolutely, which is why I've seen so many people on corticosteroids, because they're so inflamed. This can ease symptoms of inflammatory conditions such as arthritis, asthma, and skin rashes. Corticosteroids also suppress the immune system. Very important. Remember that. This can help control conditions in which the immune system mistakenly attacks its own tissues. Oh, no. Here we go, Mayo Clinic. I have said this over and over and over again, is that the body doesn't mistakenly attack its own tissues. And so here's what I want to say. The immune system is not programmed to attack itself, and it does not make a mistake. Otherwise, I've had people have come in who have been diagnosed with Crohn's disease in their late 50s, early 60s. I've had kids diagnosed with Crohn's disease in their teens. I've had people diagnosed with autoimmunity in their 20s. And then I'm like, if the body is programmed to attack itself, then why didn't it start immediately at birth? Okay. So the immune system isn't programmed to attack itself. And if you can come from the perspective, what if it's not making a mistake? Ask yourself that question. What if it's not making a mistake? Because if you understand what the immune system does, here's the functions of the immune system. The immune system is designed to go after foreign proteins, meaning proteins that aren't your own. So this can include a bacteria. This can include a food as well. And it's also designed to go after infected, cancerous, and or injured cells. So what do you mean by an infected cell? That means if your cell's infected with the virus, it will throw up a flag that say, hey, I'm sick and you need to get rid of me. I'm virally infected. You need to get rid of me, which is very important when you're talking about thyroid issues. But also you will see that cells that are cancerous also throw up a flag to alert your immune system that I'm sick. And then also, once you injure cells, once they become injured, like you sprain your ankle, your immune system is designed to clean that up. You wouldn't sprain your ankle and then all of a sudden say, you know what, my body is attacking itself. No, it's not. It's the function of the immune system is to clean out foreign proteins, infected, cancerous, and injured cells. So start looking at that from a different perspective. Maybe my immune system is not messing up. Okay. So what does the Mayo Clinic say about the side effects of corticosteroids? So corticosteroids that you take by mouth affect your entire body. For this reason, they are the most likely type of corticosteroids to cause, I love how they say, side effects. They're not side effects, they're effects. They just don't like them, so then they call side effects. And that's why people have so much patience with medications, is because they call them side effects. But if I said, nope, the effects are this, you would be a lot more in tune to what's happening inside of your body. So here are some of the effects. Okay, we're not even going to call them side effects. A buildup of fluid causing swelling in your lower legs, high blood pressure. Well, why on earth would it cause high blood pressure? Because remember, it's a stress hormone. Okay, if you have a lot of cortisol, your blood pressure is going to go up. Problems with mood swings, memory, behavior, and other psychological effects such as confusion or delirium. And I want you to think of this. If you have a bear chasing and your body is just circulating with high amounts of cortisol, does it affect your mood? Does it affect your short-term memory on what you are experiencing, what you're remembering? Does it affect your behavior? And then can it cause upset stomach? Yes. Think about when I'm stressed of how it causes stomach upset, and think of weight gain in the belly, the face, and in the back of the neck. And that's why high amounts of stress long-term can cause a lot of these issues as well. When taking corticosteroids by mouth or orally for longer term, you may also experience, again, from the Mayo Clinic, problems with the eyes, such as glaucoma or cataracts. If you understand what cortisol actually does, its main thing is cause an awakening response, and then also to mobilize blood sugars, in which it can cause a round face, which is sometimes called a moon face, and it can also cause high blood sugar, which can trigger or worsen diabetes, for example. It can cause an increased risk of infections. The reason why, because it's an immunosuppressant, especially with common bacterial, viral, and fungal microorganisms. Can cause bone fractures and thinning bones called osteoporosis, can cause fatigue, loss of appetite, nausea, and muscle weakness, thin skin, bruising, and slower wound healing, all because of immunosuppression and things like that. So what about, that's oral steroids. What about inhaled corticosteroids? So side effects of inhaled corticosteroids. So I want you to think of like asthma medication and things like that. It can cause fungal infection in the mouth, known as oral thrush. It can also cause hoarseness of your voice. And topical corticosteroids that you may apply to your skin can lead to thin skin, skin lesions, and also acne. What are the side effects of injected corticosteroids? You know, you have a sprain or you hurt something and they're just running to get some kind of corticosteroid injection into you. Injected corticosteroids can cause temporary side effects near the site of the shot. These side effects include skin thinning, loss of color in the skin, and also intense pain. Other symptoms may include facial flushing, insomnia. Why would it cause insomnia and high blood sugar? Well, insomnia, again, cortisone is a derivative of cortisol. And remember, the more cortisol you have, the more that your body is going to be more wired. Healthcare providers usually limit corticosteroid injections to 3 or 4 a year, depending on each person's situation. So why do they not want you to give those things? Because of the, not side effects, but the effects, because it can cause things like high blood sugar, and it can cause osteoporosis or you lose bone mass into that area. Guys, we're talking about some nasty stuff, but people think I just need a cortisone injection and they go to it all the time. This comes from the British Medical Journal from a couple of years ago, about not quite 6 years ago, and it's called Short-Term Use of Oral Corticosteroids and Related Harms Among Adults in the United States, a population-based cohort study. So here's what they said. They looked at about 1,500,000 people, give or take a few thousand. 21% of them received at least one outpatient prescription for short-term use of oral corticosteroids over a 3-year period. So they took it at least one time within a 3-year period. And here's where some of the effects of what they found. We're not talking about side effects, we're talking about effects. The most common indications for use were for respiratory tract infections, spinal conditions, and allergies. Some of the biggest effects that they saw were increased rates of sepsis, venous thromboembolisms, and also fracture. So the conclusion was 1 in 5 American adults in a commercially insured plan. So the reason why they got these statistics were from insurers. This is why health insurance does not give you good health, by the way. They were given prescriptions for short-term use of oral corticosteroids during a 3-year period with an associated increased risk of adverse events, even if they were taking it for short-term, okay? Now, going back to the Mayo Clinic, they said, reduce your risk of corticosteroid side effects, okay? Here's what they recommend. Number one, ask your healthcare provider about trying to lower the doses or intermittent dosing, okay? What they're saying is I need to be on this medication, but hey, doc, can I just take less of it as well? Talk to your provider about switching to non-oral forms of corticosteroids. So like if you have asthma, taking an inhaler instead of taking an oral corticosteroid. Ask your provider if you should take calcium and vitamin D supplements because long-term corticosteroid therapy may cause thinning bones called osteoporosis, in which there's a lot of people who are suffering with that as well. Take care when discontinuing therapy. If you take oral corticosteroids for a long time now, listen to this. Your adrenal glands may produce less of their natural steroid hormones. So you may produce less of your natural hormones from your adrenal glands as well. If the dosage is reduced too quickly, your adrenal glands may not have time to recover, and you may experience fatigue, body aches, and lightheadedness. Okay. This is very, very interesting, guys, because anytime that you take something exogenously, the gland that's responsible for the production, it will start to go down. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. Have you ever heard of testicular atrophy when doing steroids, when you're doing testosterone and things like that? Why on earth does a man's testicles start to atrophy when they're on even TRT? Because if you give that hormone exogenously and you are exogenously increasing the levels of testosterone, then the testicles say, you know what, we don't need to make it anymore because we can see what these levels are at. And then if they don't make it, whatever you're not using, you're losing, okay? It's no different than you stop moving and some of the muscles start to atrophy, which is why one of the side effects is hypogonadism or having testicular atrophy, okay? This is just unbelievable, guys, because if you're taking cortisone all the time, your adrenal glands probably aren't working very well. And I want you to look at it. If you look at cortisol and you look at cortisone, these things right here are made by the adrenal gland. But I also want you to look upstream, guys, and you will see the production of progesterone. Okay. Now, depending on if you're cycling or not, progesterone can be made from the corpus luteum that's coming from the released egg, or if you're postmenopausal, it's coming from your adrenal glands as well. So here's the question I want you to think of. Do you think that high stress, ladies, do you think it will affect your menstrual cycle? And I had this discussion with a woman today who's had a lot of menstrual cycle issues. I'm like, are you under any kind of stress? She's like, oh, a lot of stress. So she's got high amounts of cortisol that are being, produced. This can affect your menstrual cycle, which is why one of the hallmarks of being on long-term corticosteroid use is having a disrupted menstrual cycle. I want you to think about it. If you're taking oral corticosteroids, you're telling the body, under a lot of stress as well. And your brain perceives that, which is why it can shut down the menstrual cycle. Here's another thing that comes from Helio News. Use of systemic corticosteroids are linked with a worse COVID-19 outcomes. And this is where I'll probably get banned officially from YouTube, and I'm here for it. All right. That's why I have a Rumble account. I'm just literally one video away from being demonetized. And I'm like, I don't do this for that. Whatever. You can cut out my tongue, but that's not going to stop my message. So one of the things that they found is taking systemic corticosteroids, you had a worse outcome to COVID-19. And here's what they say. In a new study, approved asthma biologics and systemic corticosteroids were not associated with an increased risk for SARS-CoV-2 infection, but use of systemic corticosteroids was linked with worse COVID-19 outcomes. Okay. Basically what they're saying is this: if you're on a corticosteroid, it's not gonna affect if you get it or not. And I'm like, well, duh. Because if you've never had exposure to that specific virus, I don't care how strong your immune system is, you're gonna see that virus for the first time and you're gonna get sick. You're gonna have a pretty good anti-inflammatory response from it. That's why you have an immune system that's always adapting, that's always learning, and that's why re-exposure puts you in a lot better position, for it. Which is why some people keep saying, I've gotten COVID 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and I'm like, what on earth is going to your immune system, and what are you doing in order to keep that immune system? I'm like, are you getting a natural infection, or are you bypassing all your barriers and doing what with it? Okay, so they weren't associated with an increased risk of SARS-CoV-2 because everyone had to get it. However, if you did have it, you had a lot worse outcome, meaning you had a lot bigger problem being able to get over it because it is, in fact, an immunosuppressant. Okay. So let me ask you a question. Do you think high stress will affect your immune system? Okay. Or simulating a high stress response, do you think it affects your immune system? We already know that it does. And I want you to think of this. If you've ever known anybody that has Epstein-Barr virus or got mononucleosis, and you ask them, what were you going through that allowed you to be able to get so sick? And they'll say kind of the same thing. Oh, I wasn't sleeping enough. I was under a high amount of stress. I was eating just a lot of garbage. And most people do have Epstein-Barr. They get it, but not everyone gets mono from it. Okay. So you have to have a high stress response in order for that to happen, to suppress the immune system. So do you think high stress will affect your immune response? Number one, yes, it will. Do you think it will affect, therefore, a vaccine response? And the answer is yes, 100%. So this comes from, again, Helio Rheumatology from about 2 years ago. And they said the American College of Rheumatology recommends a 4th dose of COVID-19 mRNA vaccine for patients on immunosuppressants. So early on, they were just like, the beatings will continue until morale improved. And here's what they said. The American College of Rheumatology has updated its COVID-19 vaccine clinical guidance. Well, why didn't they know this in the first place? That's what I want to know. For patients with rheumatic disease, to recommend a 4th mRNA vaccine dose in patients receiving immunosuppressive or immunomodulatory therapy. Okay. They're on that therapy because they're chronically inflamed and the immune system's not messing up. They just haven't identified where's the tissue damage taking place or where's the infection actually taking place. And that's why they are on steroids, and that affected their vaccine response. Just remember this: you can't create something from nothing. Yet that's what they continue trying to do. Guys, I have so much more information about this, about the immune system, but you have to go to my Rumble page, look up Dr. Nathan Thompson, and I have a whole entire webinar. It's a little bit longer, and it's called Make Immune System Strong Again. I tried to upload this to YouTube about 1.5 years ago. YouTube took it down within 10 minutes of me putting it on. They're watching me, and they took it down within 10 minutes of me putting it up. But the lovely Rumble platform, I love it. And it's still up there, and you can go back and you can watch that because I talk about the immune system so much, and I talk about so many different things. You will, if you love learning, you will absolutely love that. And you can watch that whole entire thing on the Rumble platform for free. So make sure that you go and you watch it all the way through. Comment that you watch it, because I would love to know that you guys are actually watching it. So here we go again. Cortisol, cortisone. Look how it affects progesterone. Look how it affects a stress response and things like that. Now, I'm going to give you something that's very, very important because this is a Dutch test, and a Dutch test is one of the best tests in order to look at cortisone and cortisol. Okay. Now, this woman, when she came in, had terrible body aches and she felt tired all the time. Now, she had been on corticosteroids for years, about 20 years. And the reason why she's on corticosteroids was because the doctor said you have rheumatoid arthritis. So just go on steroids forever. So she had been taking steroid medication, not having a menstrual cycle, pretty much resolves to the fact that I'll never be able to have a baby because those steroids just shut down the menstrual cycle. But when we tested this, you can see how high her cortisone levels were and how absolutely tanked her cortisol levels were. And I want you to think of this. Why were cortisol levels tanked? Well, because taking a corticosteroid for such a long time, it shut down the adrenal glands normal function. And so it wasn't making that on the own. You can see this from looking at the actual Dutch test and looking at her cortisol. No wonder she was so tired all the time. People say cortisol is a bad hormone. No, it's not, because if you didn't make any cortisol, you wouldn't be able to get out of bed, nor would you be able to control your blood sugar. And then if you look at her cortisone anti-inflammatory, you can see just how high it was. And this is what she was taking literally all the time in order to help all of the joint pain and all of the achiness that she had. Now, we actually tested her, and we actually even tested her for rheumatoid arthritis. She didn't have it. So then I looked at this and I said, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been exposed to mold? And she's like, yeah. I grew up in a house that literally had mold in the ceiling tiles. We could see it all the time. And then I said, well, who else in your family has been exposed to mold? She's like, my whole family. Like, well, who's sick in your family? She said, all of my siblings are. They've all had weird things going on, including cancers and things like that. This is something affecting her immune system response. And I said, I want you to get tested for mold. And this is what she had. And normally this specific mycotoxin should be under 10, and she was at 141 easily. So her body was always having an immune system response. And this is why mold can be so damaging for so many people, especially if they cannot tag it with an antibody, be able to get rid of it. Because even though she was out of the situation, she could not remove it from her body. And some people are like that. About 26% of people, they just can't remove it out of the body. So for majority of people, you get out of the situation and you feel better, things start to calm down. But for some people, it just constantly perpetuates. And these are the people who we see that are very chronically ill. And we have to spend a long time trying to get this stuff out of their body. But if they don't give up, there's redemption. Okay. There's always redemption. And I've seen people absolutely riddled with mold who couldn't even work out, who are now working out, every single day. And I'm so happy that they didn't give up, because you're seeing that their bodies are recovering if they're doing the right thing. Now, so I want you to think of this, guys. People say, why are you so against doctors? I'm not, because I believe that doctors do a wonderful job of putting out fires. Okay. I will use it. If I have a fire, I will use a doctor hands down. No problem doing that. But I'm trying to prevent myself from having a fire in the first place, because they can save your lives. But I want you to think of this. If you look at this picture right here, this is a sick house. This is a decaying, crumbling, and rotting house. So I want you to think of this. So many times when it comes into healthcare, we run into and we have a fire, and the doctors go in and they put out the fire, which would be kind of like if you had a fire in your house and sprinkling it with water all the time. And then the next day, what happens is now you have another fire. So the fire department comes in, sprinkles it again with water. And then they come up and they're like, well, this has happened twice. One of the things that we're going to do to prevent another fire is we're just going to keep sprinkling your house every day with water. And I want you to think of it. A water damaged house will carry mold, and you will no longer be able to inhabit that house. You're living in a sick house. It's a house that will decay, crumble, and rot. And we do that, and this is our form of healthcare, in which we're constantly putting out fires, and then we wonder, wow, I made it to 80, but I've been chronically ill from the time that I was 45 or 50 years of age. We're living longer than ever before because we're really good at putting out fires, but we're also, this has been proven, we're also living longer being chronically ill. And that's not okay with me, because this is what most people's bodies look like by the time that they're 50 years of age. And it's no longer inhabitable. And they just sprinkle it with water and they're still chronically ill, but at least they don't have a fire to keep them around and keep them living. But this is why they feel like absolute garbage. This is why I believe we can do better. We can do so much better. And if you agree with that, give me a thumbs up and tell me I agree. Okay. So, what are some of the biggest issues, guys, when it comes to why you're sick? I will say this. Number one, immune. Number two, it's stress. Number one, immune. Number two, it's stress. Well, how do we get like this immune system response? Well, we can have issues with carrying infection. This is why um, uh, like PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, can just wreck the body. This is also why like food allergies make a huge difference. This is why when we start having immune system responses and chronic inflammation going on, this is why this can absolutely wreck us long term. But then the other thing is, you can go back and watch the video that I did on stress. Stress will absolutely it will devastate a woman much quicker than it will devastate a man. The reason why women come to me before a man does is because they start seeing hormonal changes and shifts. They start feeling bad and they come to see me first. But men, we don't feel it because we don't feel those hormone fluctuations, especially with like testosterone. We may be low testosterone, we just not have a lot of energy, but we don't want to do anything about it, because men in general, I'm sorry, men, you do have a lot higher ego than women, and you don't want to ask for help. So I want you to think of whatever is bothering me, think immune and long-term stress. Okay. Now, I want to leave you with this. You can cut out the tongue of a baby to get them to stop crying, but it still doesn't address why they were crying. Let me say that again. You can cut out the tongue of a baby to get them to stop crying, but it doesn't address the reason why they were crying in the first place. And I'm going to go back to this. This comes from Thomas Edison over, I think, 100 years ago. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the prevention, cause, and the prevention of disease. Okay. So let me ask you a question. Does your doctor do that? Does your doctor do that? And are they testing you properly? And are they giving you the right guidance based off of the testing? This right here, we are the doctors of the future. And it's not to wait until you have a fire, then douse yourself with all kinds of drugs to fight the effects of the inflammation. We have so many people doing that, which is why they're alive, but they're not healthy. They're alive, but they truly aren't living. What good is it to live an extra 20 years of being chronically sick, ill, and feeling like garbage, when you could start living now and start living well? And start doing the right things in order to start creating your health. This is why, guys, inflammation is so important. This is why our next in-person event is going to be on Tuesday, April 2nd. If you're from the Chicagoland area, please go up and please get registered for that. April 2nd at 6 o'clock p.m. That's going to be that's going to be an amazing event. Please get registered for that, because I'd love to be able to see you in person. And then we also have the webinar that's coming up. If you are outside the Chicagoland area, I will probably take this down after next week. So that makes sure, if you are on the fence, now's your time to actually get registered for it. But remotely, if you're outside the Chicagoland area, but you're within the contiguous 48 states, watch the webinar, because some of the things that I talked about tonight, I'll talk about in the webinar, but in a little bit more detail as well. Issues with weight loss, resistance, cancer, infertility, thyroid disease, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune, hormone issues. It's all linked and related to inflammation. So please don't delay, don't put this off, and start learning about it now and start addressing this with a Wellness Way doctor, especially. If you have any concerns, please reach out to me via message. I'll do my best to try to respond as quickly as I can as well. And if you are watching, make sure again that you say hello. I love seeing that people watch from all over the United States. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Corticosteroids and your immune system. Make sure that you go back and watch this again. I hope this helps you. I hope you got tremendous value from it as well. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope to talk to you soon. I'll be with you next week with a new topic. Give me some suggestions. I'm open to all of them. And I hope, guys, that you be well, be safe, and as always, remember who you are. We'll talk to you guys very soon. All right. We'll see you next Monday.